All right, we've had a great week celebrating science, but tonight I am going to talk about sports. As Cecil mentioned, I run an amazing running group up in Boston, and usually when people find out that my hobby is running for 3 to 4 hours at a time, like Cecil, their first response is, I could never do that. And respectfully, I disagree. I think anybody could run a marathon if you put your mind to it, but I also know that a lot of us in earth science already feel like we're running a race, and that's a race against our changing climate. So I'm going to explore that a bit today. So if you aren't familiar, a marathon is a 26.2-mile race, and I ran my first one in October of 2021, and I was hooked. And progress has not been linear ever since then, but I did run 2 more this year, one in Berlin, and then 2 weeks later, right here in Chicago. So the marathon is usually not considered type 1 fun, although I think it can be at times more of a type 2 fun situation, especially when you get to around mile 23, when it can be really difficult just to put one foot in front of the other. And that is actually a very useful metaphor in other parts of life. So when I'm not running and I'm not eating, I work as NASA's capacity building program, and we enable people to use earth science information to make decisions, which I love my job, but it can be pretty stressful when we're dealing with big issues like climate change. Luckily, I spend a lot of time plodding around Boston on all of my training runs, and I spend that time thinking occasionally about bigger problems like that one. So today I'm going to share 5 lessons I've learned from long distance running that also apply to the climate crisis. The first one is about data. Data is one way to know a thing, but there are many other ways. And let me tell you, runners love data. This is just some of the data from one of the runs I went on this summer. It's got heart rate, paces, even information about how I slept the night before. So you could look at that and say, hey, Sydney, it looks like you had a pretty good run. But there's so much that goes into that. Your nutrition, hydration, the weather that day, your playlist. And so what really tells you that what you need to know is what you feel inside of your body. Very similarly, in our Earth system, we have a lot of ways of knowing things. We have so much data, and yet that's not the only way that we can know things about our Earth, because similarly, it's a complex system just like our body. We need to consider those other ways of knowing and give them equal weight and importance in all of our work. But sometimes for scientists, that can be a little opaque, a little challenging. They don't know how to integrate that information, which means we need to incentivize them to use that kind of information in addition to Earth science data. Okay, brings me to lesson number 2. Sustainability is the goal. In my running career, I want to be able to run for my whole entire life, which sometimes means sacrificing shorter-term goals. So for example, if you start to feel an ache or pain, it's important to rest rather than push through to get to a real injury, which is something I had to deal with and learn from this year. Very similarly, we need to have a sustainable workforce if we want to be able to make change in the long term. Even though our work feels very urgent, we need to do what we can to help people avoid burnout and feel included in their workspaces so that we can have a long-term workforce for these big kinds of challenges. Equally important is the concept of community. A lot of times, what gets me out the door on a run is the promise of seeing friends. And similarly, we need to build an earth science community where people feel included and welcome and excited to come to work every single day, which I think we're trying to do here maybe tonight. So as any athlete will tell you, training means a lot more than just doing your sport. So strength training, sleep, biking, and swimming, those all feel like distractions when you think, I need to be running. But all those things actually advance your progress rather than hinder that. Very similarly, we talk all the time about the importance of science communication like this, or involving communities in your work. But we have to do a lot more than just talk about those things. We actually have to put time and dollars into those. We need to invest in the kind of change that we want to see. That means all the way around the cycle, from research and gathering data to actually implementing that with users. We have to put the time and the money behind those sentiments if we actually want to see change in this world. Okay, now I told you before that a marathon is 26.2 miles, and I kind of lied, because there's a lot more work that goes into that. So training for Chicago this year, I ran for 12 weeks, about 40 miles a week. That's 500 miles, so 26.2 miles is a drop in the bucket, yes? No, it doesn't feel like that in a marathon, but theoretically, the idea is the same thing. A lot of solutions to climate change can feel really, really small, and then the cynic in me says, wonderful, that's another entrepreneur that's turning seaweed into biodegradable plastic. Cool, big whoop. But actually, all that cumulative change really adds up over time. So training for a marathon, your body begins to adapt to the load and the stress. So even though those miles look small, they really add up quickly. And very similarly, small changes and chipping away at the climate crisis can help. But what's most important is that we just start. When a problem feels huge, taking one step at a time can feel very empowering. That is a lesson from running that I hope to apply elsewhere in life. Thank you very much.